I was in Atlanta, Georgia for Ted Turner's birthday party some months back, and they had a very modern coffee place there with a lot of new equipment, and I was trying to figure something out, and the guy in line behind me was a little impatient. I said, you know, you'd think with 25 degrees you'd be able to figure these things out. The guy said, maybe that's the problem. I'm going to be drawing in the next 15 minutes from a book that is in draft and is scheduled for publication in January. It's called The Great Transition, and it is about the global shift from fossil fuels, from coal and oil, to solar and wind. The earlier transitions from coal to oil, for example, spread over centuries. This one is going to be compressed within a decade. We're going to see, I think, a half century of change in the next 10 years, and I'm going to explain some of the reasons why. We look around the world now and we can see glimpses of the new energy economy emerging. We see Denmark, for example, last year got 33% of its electricity from wind energy, and it's climbing higher each year. In December, for the month of December, it hit 55%. This is the first time a country for a whole month has gotten over half of its electricity from solar or from wind. We're seeing rapid growth in other countries in Europe, in Portugal, Spain, Ireland, where they're getting 22, 18, and 17% of their electricity from wind. On June 9th, which was a sunny day in Germany, they got over half of their electricity from solar. In Spain, wind has overtaken nuclear power as a source of energy. In southern Australia, wind has overtaken coal as a source of energy. Worldwide, wind is growing about 30% per year. Solar is growing by 50% per year. So we've got some very, very rapid growth rates underway. In China, where we think, people are always saying, but what about China? In China, wind energy has overtaken nuclear energy. China now has under construction 7 wind mega complexes, each of which will have at least 10,000 megawatts of generating capacity. 10,000 megawatts is 10 nuclear power plants, for example. So each of these 7 will have a wind generating capacity equal to the 10 nuclear power plants. Huge. The largest of these wind complexes will be in Inner Mongolia. It will have a generating capacity of 38,000 megawatts. That's enough electricity to run a country like Poland. I mean, we've never seen scaling up in the energy sector like this before. If you have a 1,000 megawatt coal plant or nuclear power plant, it's big. But we're looking now at 5 and 10 and 20, and in this case, 38,000 megawatts in Inner Mongolia of wind energy. Enormous growth. In the United States, we're beginning to get some glimpses of new energy economy. Iowa and South Dakota now get more than 25% of their electricity from wind. The goal in Iowa within the wind community is to take this up to 50% by 2018. Texas is now getting 10% of its electricity from wind, and it's growing fast. There are huge investments being made in Texas now in acquiring land where there's strong wind. And the plan is to lay a cable from Texas to California and export Texas wind to California. We're beginning to see things engaged on a scale we haven't seen before. India is beginning to move very rapidly. They're now planning under the new administration solar plants with more than 1,000 megawatts each, some of them several thousand megawatts, a huge commitment. One of the big users of energy in India is irrigation. They have 26 million irrigation pumps, but they are now in the process of switching from diesel fuel to solar-driven electric pumps. And the reason for that is economic. It is much cheaper to invest in solar cells to generate the electricity and run the pumps than it is to use diesel fuel, which is oil, of course, and is very costly for farmers. One of the things we're seeing in this country now is as more and more homes, and this is particularly true in the southwestern United States, more and more homeowners put solar panels on the roof because it's so economic now. In some situations, electricity from a solar panel can come in at about half the price that the local utility is charging for electricity. So we're seeing this enormous surge in investment of individual homeowners putting solar panels on their roofs. And this is market-driven. We're seeing the geography of energy change, and change dramatically. During the last century, most of our energy was coming from places like the Middle East, Saudi oil exports, for example, halfway around the world. Now, with millions of rooftop solar installations in place and many more coming, we're getting the electricity from about 12 feet away. Our rooftops are the energy sources of the future. The geography of energy is changing from having to haul oil, for example, halfway around the world, or having to get all the coal in this country, or much of it from West Virginia, and having to transport that. Now we're looking at local energy, and we're looking at our rooftops in a way that is totally changing the energy, the structure of the energy economy. We're looking at running our cars in the future not on oil, but on electricity. The leader in this is Norway. Norway's pulling out the stops, partly because they have so much cheap hydropower, and they're literally beginning to run their cars now on hydropower. And they're phasing out gasoline, and this is something they're going to do in a matter of years. This is not the next few decades. This is something they're moving very rapidly on. We're seeing the Tesla now coming on the market as a hybrid. We're seeing Nissan, the big Japanese automobile manufacturer, with the Leaf, which is an all-electric car, now selling very well in the United States. These trends are being driven largely by market forces. They're being also driven by concern about climate change. They're being driven by non-governmental organizations like the Sierra Club, for example. The Sierra Club several years ago launched a Beyond Coal campaign, and the principal target was coal-fired power plants. When they launched that program, we had in this country 530 coal-fired power plants. They have succeeded in closing or negotiating the closure of 140 of those, which brings us from 530 down to 390. Their goal is to close every coal-fired power plant in this country by 2030. We've seen another interesting development in this country that we've not seen before in any sort of new area of environmental emphasis and investment. And that is we're seeing billionaires pouring billions literally into renewable energy and wind power. Warren Buffett, for example, save the applause to the end. Warren Buffett, for example, one of the wealthiest people in the world, announced a couple years ago he was investing $15 billion in renewable energy in the Southwest. Most of this is going into solar farms, but some into wind farms. He announced in January another $15 billion commitment to investing in both solar and wind. You may remember it made news when he bought $1.9 billion worth of Siemens, S-I-E-M-E-N, the German company's wind turbines for delivery to Iowa. And the plan in Iowa is to get half of their electricity from wind. Iowa is a very strong wind state, and Warren Buffett is seeing that and taking advantage of it. Ted Turner is building 7 solar power plants in the southeastern United States. Why the Southeast? Because the Southeast has really lagged behind the rest of the country in developing solar and wind resources. So Ted is pushing a lot of money into that region. Another billionaire, Phil Anschutz, A-N-S-C-H-U-T-Z, an oil and gas billionaire from Denver, is now building a 3,000 megawatt wind farm in Wyoming, which is a wind-rich state, and a transmission line to take that wind-generated electricity to California. He happens to own an old railroad right-of-way, so it's pretty easy for him to do this. One of the things that comes with a rapid transition, which is what we are in now, this is going to happen very fast. We're not talking about a few generations. We're talking about change that's going to occur in the next decade. One of the consequences of stranded assets, coal mines that have been closed in West Virginia will never be opened again. We're seeing oil refineries are closing. I think our oil consumption in this country has dropped about 23% over the last 6 years or so, and it's going to continue to go down. With very little dependence on coal, we don't need to worry about the transmission facilities, the trains that were loaded with coal. They're rapidly becoming history. We're also seeing stranded human assets. We're seeing coal miners for whom there are no jobs now. We're seeing petroleum geologists suddenly discover that the oil companies do not really need them anymore because they're not looking for new oil. Oil can't compete with solar and wind. We're looking at change in every facet of our lives as a result of this energy transition, going from coal and oil to solar and wind. It's going to affect universities. There won't be much need for petroleum geologists in the future. There will be need for wind meteorologists, for example. So the energy sector is going to see a major shift in the demand for the kind of personnel, for the skills that are needed in the new energy economy. Those who see these changes, see them coming, and anticipate and work with them will be the winners. Those who try to deny that things are changing, and the oil companies routinely do this. They say, oh, people are talking, but nothing's going to change. We don't have to worry. That's whistling in the dark, if ever I've heard it. Oil is in trouble. So we're looking at a future now that's just very different from anything that we've seen before. It's going to be a new world that will be shaped by the new energy economy. And it is difficult now to describe it in detail because we don't have enough sense of exactly what it's going to translate into. We do know that energy is going to be localized. With solar and wind, but solar in particular, energy is very local. So we're not going to be dependent on countries halfway around the world for energy. And this is true for basically all countries, because the new energy sources, solar and wind, are indigenous resources. They don't have to be translated. So it's going to lead to an economic and a political stability that we didn't have in the oil age, when everyone was worried about a possible war in the Middle East or an oil export embargo or what have you. It's very difficult to interfere with the supply of solar energy. So the geopolitics of energy are changing and very dramatically as we make the transition from oil and coal to solar and wind. It's a very exciting future that we're looking at, and I hope to have this described in a bit more detail than I've had time to do tonight in the book, The Great Transition, which should be on the market in January. Thank you very much.